Hey, guys, it is Allison. I am the host of your show, Allison Answers Mission Awake. I cannot wait to sit down with you today and go over how we are going to crush the mediocrity in your life that has been plaguing our society since the beginning of time. I cannot wait to have a real deal conversation that includes intelligence, fun, excitement, and real actionable steps to make a real difference in the life that you're living now and making it into something you can be damn proud of and excited to live. Sit down, put on your damn seatbelt, and get ready for the ride of your life. Hey, guys, how are you today? I have a guest. I have a cool guest, and his name is Mike Machin. You know that I'm going to have a propensity to call him Michael because I don't know how to shorten names. I have this weird thing that I have to call him Michael for some reason, but I'm going to try not to.
That's okay.
So is it
That's
okay?
my real name. Yeah, I mean, nobody calls me that, but it's fine with me.
You know, it's so funny. So many people that I talk to or whatever, everyone says, Allison, you're the only person who says that, who calls me that, except for my mother. I'm like, I'm so sorry.
Right.
So I just wanted to warn you in advance. So let me tell you a little bit about how I ended up having Mike on the show. Mike is very interesting to me. We belong to the same group. It's called Arate, which you guys know. And he, I couldn't find a bio on him just because he's, it seems like a humble dude. Seems like he's not really that focused on those sort of things. And I don't really know yet what he's focused on, but he has such an amazing business and a mission. And I really want you guys to hone in and hear how this applies to your life, how you can find meaning and mission in even things that don't seem traditional, or they could even seem possibly even rebellious or something. Finding meaning and goodness in things that maybe society doesn't find meaning in. So Mike, I want to ask you, could you explain what you do and your mission? Could you describe it to people?
Yeah, sure. I could give you the sort of quick-ish side backstory that'll sort of lead to it. So I started a business in 2002. I was doing motion graphics for television shows. I was directing music videos and doing all this kind of creative commercial art type of work. And I grew up as an artist. As a kid, I was always drawing and stuff. So the reason I chose that route was because I never really saw what my mom always encouraged me, my dad as well. They encouraged me to do something with my art when I grew up, as as a career or something like that. But as I got older, I was like, I don't know what you would do. Do I sell drawings? Do I draw cartoons for a newspaper? Like, I couldn't really get my head around it. But then when I learned about graphic design, that made a lot more sense to me, because there's a customer that has a need, and I can use my artistic talents to fulfill that need, whether it's a logo, an animation, or whatever that is, and in the commercial type of space. So I did that for a long time. I still kind of do that. But what happened was, after some years, I think maybe 13 years or so, I don't remember exactly, but it was around 2014 that I was really burned out on that whole trying to meet creativity with a client and all this kind of thing. It's a difficult thing to do, especially if you're a highly trained, highly skilled designer and you're working with people that don't have that same training. There's a lot of like weird disconnects and stuff. And anyway, so I started getting burned out, and I was trying to look for something that was more fulfilling, and it started as a side thing. So the way that all came about was, I grew up as kind of like a rebellious kid, and I ended up finding graffiti as a artistic outlet for myself. And it sort of lined up because I wasn't like a troublemaker, like going to juvenile hall, like, or, robbing people or any kind of things like that. But I was just always kind of like I don't know, a little bit rebellious, you know, like I was the outcast heavy metal kid growing up, and then a skateboarder. And so I was always on these sort of somewhat counterculture type of things. So when graffiti came around and I started doing that, it really sparked my interest back in art again, just in this other way that maybe is a little bit destructive, but so fast forward, and I'm doing my career and all this stuff, and graffiti sort of takes a back seat to building my life, and I'm building this other business. As I got burned out, I started looking back to graffiti. I mean, I never really fully left that culture, so I wanted to find a way to get back involved, but do it in a positive way. So I knew some people that were running a program called the Venice Art Walls. It's this, there used to be a pavilion on Venice Beach. It was this big amphitheater. Did you ever go there?
Yeah. I'm familiar with it. Yeah.
It was cool probably in the 70s, but then eventually it got run by, drug dealers and, those kind of places attract graffiti as well. So any kind of places that are sort of neglected by the general public or the city, graffiti writers tend to gravitate towards those spaces. So that's what ended up happening. But it ended up turning into this really great what we call a
such a powerful statement, and I have to remember it. That where like people neglect it, that's where like the rebellion came, that in that spot, that's where the rebellion came in. It just became illuminated to me when you said it. I hated interrupting you, but I was
it's fine.
I wanted to write it down because it's interesting to me.
Yeah, and it's just sort of like, if nobody cares about this spot and there's all these walls, we might as well go in and do art on it. So I started going there a lot. They eventually tore down most of it, and they buried most of it. So it's basically 2 walls on the beach now, and it's run by a nonprofit. And so I started volunteering there, and I was in my 40s. I don't remember exactly how old I was in 2014. I'm 48 now, so whatever that math ends up being. So I'm there as an older guy, and I'm kind of helping these kids choose a place to paint. So that was basically my role, and just make sure nothing got out of hand. It was just, I was there to monitor it. And so what really spawned this direction that my life is going in now was, I feel like it's one conversation with one kid, but it could have been multiple, and it just kind of, combined into my head as this one conversation. But the way it goes is, I'm talking to this teenage kid as a 40-something-year-old man, and the kid's really actually listening to me. And it kind of like sparked something in my head, because I was like, when I was 15 years old, there's no 40-something-year-old dude that's going to tell me anything, especially as a rebellious kid. So that's when I realized that I had an opportunity, whereas a lot of people my age may want to help kids and they may want to do things, but they may be able to do a lot of different things, but they would lack this very important connection that I found, which is, even though I'm older, I'm actually one of you, and we're doing the same things, and we're speaking the same language. I know the same vernacular. I grew up doing the things that he's doing. And so that's when I realized I had this opportunity, because I had gone on to do more responsible things than most people that I grew up with, in graffiti. And so I was trying to figure out different ways, like how do I use this opportunity to reach kids, and try to provide something for them. So long story short, I know that was longer than I intended. I have a hard time.
I just want to tell you something. I just want to say something. When you just said that, I know it's longer. I just want to say something, that as you were speaking, like I felt tears coming in my eyes, because you may not realize it, but you just touched on such an important key point in all of life. And I think I just didn't want to blow over it, because you described a real connection, and like an adolescent is in a stage of like individuation where they're trying to identify who they are. And instead of us trying to fight that, you joined this person. And I feel like, you know, as a therapist, that's the main thing that I always talk about. And I'm not going to go into my whole thing. I want to hear you, but I'm just connecting in that the way I have all these, you know, years of academia, whatever, but the real way that I can ever connect with a human being and help them is through my own tragedy into triumph. The difficulties that I've had, I can sit and hold space with them. I get it. I'm them. So, and people, that makes you a person of influence, which really is love, really.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah. So I just think it's really cool. And I did, because I didn't want you to think you were, because sometimes, you know, on a podcast, whatever, we feel like we're talking a long time, but you're saying so much. I'm not sure if you know it. So that's why I interrupted.
No, that's cool. I appreciate that. It helps me keep my brain focused.
Yeah.
You know, a little bit.
I need that too. Believe me.
Yeah.
I get you. Mm-hmm.
So from there, what ended up happening was I tried to find a way that I could create my own type of version of what I was volunteering for, because the reality of the situation that I was in, I couldn't really afford to spend that much time, you know, volunteering at this place. It was only open on weekends. And I really started to feel like I need to do something that I can have more access to this culture, especially the young people in this culture, and be able to provide something for them. And so since I was doing that motion graphics business, I thought of a way that I could create a studio type of environment, because part of the graffiti culture, we call it black booking. It's drawing in those, you know, hardcover sketchbooks, and we trade them or we draw in each other's books. It's a big part of the culture. A lot of times, at least when I was coming up, it's not, I don't see it as much anymore. But when you're out and about and you see another kid that's dressed similar to you and they're carrying one of those books, you're like, oh, that's a graph writer. And you'd go up and, hey, what do you write? You know, and you'd have a little interaction. Yeah. So I thought, you know, I could create a studio type environment where these kids can come, they could black book together. And then if we have a gallery, we could show art and have art shows and do all these kind of things. So that's what I ended up doing. So this will kind of go into the sort of all in kind of mentality that I have, which is I don't, and probably to my detriment, it's sometimes like I just go all, when I decide to do something, it's like, this is what I'm going to do. And I'm going to, whatever it takes kind of approach to it. So I called a buddy of mine. I owned a house at the time. I sold it a few years ago, but I owned a house. So I had a very comfortable, normal life, you know. And so I asked a buddy, hey, if I were to go and do something stupid out in San Pedro, would you be down to rent my house? And he's like, yeah, man, I love your house. So what I did was I rented my house to him, and I found a space in San Pedro that was basically just it was just a 2,400 square foot, almost a warehouse type of place, but it was just like a gutted retail space, essentially. So there was literally nothing in there except for in the very back, there was like, the best way to describe it is like an outhouse inside of a building. You know, it was like, there was a toilet in the corner and the little wall built around it. And that was basically the bathroom. There was no sink in there. And then just outside of that, there was this super makeshift, like rusty sink that was made out of plywood. There was a pipe coming out of the wall and it was resting on a coffee can, and then it sprayed into so it was this terrible building, but that's where I was going to do this, you know? So my dad and I built a wall in the middle, and I lived in the back, and we had the studio in the front, because I was doing okay, making decent money, but I couldn't afford like another $3,000 a month in bills. So I was like, how can I offset this whole thing? I rent my house to my buddy, so that takes care of some of it. And then I'm just going to live this really weird life in the back of this building. So I'm back there illegally because it's not zoned for that. And even if it is, you can't live somewhere that doesn't have like hot water, air, or no kitchen or bathroom or shower or any of that stuff. So I just lived back there. I slept on a recliner because I was scared that if the building inspectors came in and they saw a bed, they would know that I lived back there. So I tried to set it up in a way to where it just looked like I just have a bunch of stuff back there, and you know, whatever that looks like. So I just lived this really weird existence for a long time. I cooked on a hot plate, and I showered at the YMCA, and then I just built this community thing, and it grew and grew into something different. I mean, it was still kind of the same of what I had originally intended, but eventually a business came into that. And we could talk about that if it's applicable to your show.
Yeah, I want to know, like, so wait a second. So you're in this building, you're showering at the YMCA, well, you have this existence, right? I love what you said, that you made a decision, because that's how I live. Like, you just marry that decision and you go. You know, like Jim Rohn says, you know, how long do you wait for a baby to walk? You know, until it does, right? So you just stay. But your staying power, I'm just wondering, was there like a spark, or I'm hearing that there must have been a mission inside of you, because you're describing that you're living a weird life, but it's a life that you've chosen to an end. Like, there's something you're looking toward, I think.
Yeah.
Right? And what did you want?
What I wanted was a couple of things. One, I wanted to provide safe, legal venues for these kids. It's open to any graffiti writer. So if you're 50 years old and you're a graph writer, you want to come in and draw in our black books, that's awesome. It's actually, I love when that happens, because then you have what we call OGs, or old school writers, or whatever those terms are, sitting there with these young kids, and sometimes information gets passed. And that's how it was before the internet. It was sort of like ancient history, where information is passed word of mouth, generation to generation kind of thing. That's how the graffiti culture information was passed along. So I liked seeing those kinds of interactions, but deep down, what it really was about was like, a lot of these kids are maybe misguided in just considering the culture that they're part of, because I know what it's like. And I made a lot of decisions that I probably wouldn't have made had I had the same mindset as I have now. I don't regret anything that I've done. I didn't do anything too terrible, but I wrote on a bunch of stuff I probably shouldn't have. You know, it's part of it. So what I wanted to do is provide just an alternative for these kids. Like, I wasn't going to tell them, hey, don't go riding on the freeway, don't go doing all this kind of stuff. I was mainly just going to say, hey, you know, whatever you do is your business, but I have this space here for you if you want to use it. So what ended up happening was, there was a high school right down the street. And of course, there's a bunch of young graffiti writers, and they would come after school. They'd have their little school uniforms on and stuff. And just a bunch of kids would just be hanging out in the space. And every now and then I'd go out and I'd black book with them. And, you know, it's a little bit weird. I'm like this middle-aged dude just hanging out with a bunch of high school kids, but I'm trying to like give some knowledge to them, and just trying to be supportive of them, you know. And then, you know, with the art shows, was providing an opportunity. You know, if you think about art galleries and things like that, they're very selective on who they show and who they show artwork with and things like that. So I was like, I have this great opportunity to have some of the most well-known graffiti writers in the culture, because just a quick backstory, I'm from one of the most well-known graffiti crews worldwide, and I got in that in 1993. And so I have access to a lot of different people that a lot of people don't have access to. So I also had an opportunity to show artwork where you would have some of the most well-known graffiti writers in the world up next to, say, like a 13-year-old kid, you know. And that doesn't happen. It doesn't happen in I don't know if it happens anywhere. I've never seen it before. So as I'm building this thing, I'm seeing more and more opportunities. So that's one part, provide a safe legal venue for them to do their thing. Then the other part is provide a venue that they can showcase their artwork, which is also cool for them. And then it was like, well, how can I sort of be a positive role model for these kids as well? You know, so where that came, the idea with that was to start a graffiti crew. And so graffiti crews are generally a group of graffiti writers that do graffiti together. And most of the time they're very selective on who they bring in. So there's family type of crews where you have to be friends with everybody and you know you've known each other for a long time. There's other crews that they'll maybe recruit people based on their skill level. So it's a selective kind of process of creating this crew. I mean, kind of like Arte Syndicate, but just a different, you know, a different culture. And so we started a graffiti crew, but instead of doing the typical graffiti type stuff, we did more positive things. So we would go, and the crew is called Cuts. It stands for Clean Up the Streets. So what we would do is go and find, you know, say like an alley where they're dumping all this mattresses, and, you know, you've seen those before. And then some like homeless person will light all that stuff on fire. You know, it's like this crazy, it's a mess, you know? So we would go and clean all that stuff up and then do a really nice mural on the wall. And you'd usually say clean up the streets and maybe have some kind of nature type of stuff. And so what that was just sort of showing people, hey, you know, do whatever you're going to do with your graffiti. I'm not going to discourage you from doing that, but you can also do some positive stuff with it as well. So the mission was it just kept growing, and that's kind of where it stands now. We haven't done art shows for a while because of the COVID stuff, but it's coming back now. But that's basically where we're at for the nonprofit stuff.
I have so much to say about what you're saying, because I just think you say these things. I don't know if you realize it, but you say it in such a matter of fact, it's so funny. I just answered my phone on my watch by mistake. Some call from Florida and they heard me talking. So I don't even know what just happened. But anyhow, so the way you talk is in such an unassuming and humble way. And there's so much happening underneath what you're describing. There's so much. What I hear is passion. What I hear is like making such a huge difference in young people's lives that may never have ever happened. And it's not a small thing. You know, as a therapist, I mentioned to you before, you know, before we started recording, I was saying that I'm always telling parents that we never want, and same thing with my own kids, is that we don't want to tell our kids something that they need to tell themselves. It's the same thing with anyone. If somebody really needs to tell themselves something or to find an identity in something, if we're telling them that or we're criticizing them, they're more likely not to tell it to themselves. So I feel like what you seem so intelligent and you know, well-spoken and just a great role model. And I'm thinking this one part, you know, psychologically is that an adolescent, the main thing that they need to do is find an identity. So they try all these hats on. And if they're and they need to find an identity that is separate from their family so they can become something separate. And it's a good thing. But we've been conditioned in our society to communicate that as something bad. So if you're not with us, the family, in the way that we are, then somehow you're rebellious. There's something wrong with you. And then children, you fight that and they try on all these different hats, and that's normal. But we've become so conditioned to because parents become afraid. We're like, oh my God, they have blue hair. What the hell is wrong? They're going down the wrong path. But the truth is like, it's just blue hair. It's just searching for themselves, which is a process, right? So I feel like with what you're doing, you seem like you're just naturally providing this beautiful avenue for them to find themselves and to also allow the art. Like you said something so funny. You didn't even realize you said it. I have to say, maybe you realized it, but you were
probably
like,
not.
Yeah, my parents encouraged me to go. do something in my art career. And I was thinking, I don't know what to do with that. But when you said that, it was so flipped, because so many people, when they're talking about having this passion for art, they describe their parents like, my parents are like, oh, don't you dare do that in your adult life. And your parents would sound like they were the opposite.
Yeah.
Which
That's
is
something
so
that
cool.
I hear that all the time in the graffiti culture. When I'm talking to older graffiti writers, they say it all the time that their parents were very much against them doing any kind of artistic anything. They're like, you're not going to do anything with that, get a job, do all this kind of stuff. And it makes me very grateful for my parents, because they were, I feel like I remember drawing, when I was a little kid. My parents really encouraged, they got me all these like art books, and they just really, remember for Christmas, it was always art stuff and books and pencils and all these different things, so they were always very encouraging of that.
You know what I love? I feel like your parents doing that, maybe they don't realize it. And any parent listening, like that, they paved a way for this mission that you're in right now.
Yeah, for sure.
They did that by just because, and it's not just because you're doing, it's because they accepted you, and you're extending that same acceptance. Like,
yeah, that makes sense
for them, for
I
what
never thought
was
about
done
it
for you. Yeah, it's a really cool. You can hear the extension of it. We don't realize the power we have with these little influential things we do for people, how far they extend, right? So I would love to hear more. Can you just tell us what is like, in doing this, what you're doing? What is the driving force behind it? You're saying it, but like, is there a part of it like where you understand the feeling of being lost, or like, what is it when you think of these kids? Like, what drives you to be basically in the back of a building with no whatever, you have a toilet, but whatever the hell you didn't have.
Yeah, most everything else.
You had nothing. Yeah. But you had a purpose. You had nothing, but you had something that was more important to you than that. And I want to know what that is.
I mean, when I had that conversation, or I condensed a bunch of conversations into one memory, I don't remember exactly what it was, but I felt obligated to do that. Like, I was like, nobody gets this opportunity. And if they do have the opportunity, they don't know it. I've just realized that I have this opportunity. And so now I have to do something with it, because I would feel, I don't know if I'm allowed to cuss on this.
Oh, curse. I curse all the time.
Okay. I would feel like shit, if I just squandered that opportunity, because I know that it's not something I know. I had this conversation with somebody else, and they said, I told this similar, it's the same story. There's no different way to tell it. So, but they were saying, I work with juveniles and juvenile detention centers and things like that. And they said that I can do all of this stuff, but I don't have that connection. And that's what I had realized when I was talking to them, because I was like, there's just no way. Even if you're super passionate and you have all this money and all these resources, you can't sit down at a black book table with these kids and chop it up with them like a graffiti writer. You can't do it. So I'm like, I just happen to be this responsible guy somewhat. I mean, at least by the standards of the people that I was running around with. And I own a business, and I read and I do these kind of things. So, and now I find that I have this connection with these kids, and I don't have kids. I don't really have it was never really like a passion for helping kids per se. It was just sort of like, I just realized I have this opportunity, and I know a lot of the paths that this culture can lead you down. It can lead you to drugs. It can lead you to gangs. I mean, a lot of times graffiti culture leads you away from gangs, but there's a lot of violence. There's a lot of things that happen. I mean, I grew up in the suburbs, and most people that grow up in the suburbs don't get jumped. They don't get shot at. And I experienced all of those things. And I realized, like, when I'm seeing these young kids and they're kind of like, they're taking on this persona that you feel like you're supposed to have. Like, I was never a tough guy, but like, you felt like you had to kind of put that kind of vibe out there. Like, yeah, I'm a graph writer, you know, what's up, you know, kind of like,
Yeah.
and so I'm seeing these little kids, and I'm remembering, I'm like, I remember kind of being like that when I wasn't really like that. And so I don't know if that's, I don't know how much more to get into, but it's just sort of like, that obligation was just sort of like, hey, you know, if I have an opportunity to talk to these kids, I have an opportunity because I make decent money, I can provide an outlet for them and build something in that regard, you know, build something for them to come and have a safe place to be, and then be a positive role model. It just felt like an obligation, I guess. Long-winded answer to that.
It wasn't long-winded at all, because I think, and I keep saying it, but I feel like you don't realize the power of the things that you're saying. I think there's a whole thing happening, and maybe that's why they're connecting with you too, because you say it in a very calm and, you know, soothing way, but you're saying something packed with so much power. And, you know, the thing about them not being in a gang, you're creating the sense of belonging that a gang provides. You're also, the thing is, and I heard you say, like, you're in this situation when you were young, you felt like you had to be something other than you were. But you had this creative, and I think so much, this is so much of my mission, is that I feel like we all have this unbelievable spark inside of us that is taught very, very young to be dulled out, and we learn to align with other things, to be approved of by others, to be belong, you know, whatever that is. And we misalign, we move away from what we're meant to be. And it's what I'm hearing also, like, when I think about, we don't know, like, we won't know in this life, like, where these kids end up. I know from, like, I had an eating disorder in my early life, and I was hospitalized for an eating disorder. So one of the things that I learned, so I'm relating a bit to you, that I have this ability with any young girl who has an eating disorder, any body image thing. It has nothing to do with winning them over. I am them. I understand them, so they can feel me. So, and I just get them so they can talk to me. And they are such a lost group of people, girls with eating disorders, because they, and I remember feeling that way, that there's nowhere to go that someone really gets what you're talking about. Just eat, just don't eat, just whatever. So it's like, just don't draw on the building, you know, what the fudge is wrong with you, you know, just whatever. And it's like, and even when someone's well-intentioned, because I have therapists who, they can't work with people with eating disorders. I intentionally hire people who have struggled. I'm like, oh, you've had a miserable life, you have the job, because I know you're going to do a better job than somebody who hasn't had misery. But anyhow, back to what you were saying, I feel like what you're doing now, very often we don't know how far that goes. I think that when you help a 13-year-old, you're helping that 20-year-old version of that person. You're helping that person's spouse. You're helping that person's children. You're helping generations to come. And we don't know that what that one turn does for someone's life. So very often we hear, like, Ed Milet talks about the man who helped his father.
That's what I was just thinking when you were talking about that.
Yeah, I feel like something ignited, some spark of life went on in your brain, and you were like, this is my job. This is my obligation. And maybe Ed Milet's dad had that, but I do believe, I believe it, that there's going to be generations, maybe we'll never know how many, but there's going to be a lot that's going to happen from what you're doing. You just create the space, you show up, and you are who you are, which is cool. Like, that's what it's, you know, but there's more to you, I'm sure. Like, did you as a teenager have like some internal struggles that you feel like you're somehow resolving, not your own struggles, but you're helping to resolve someone else's, or even your
Maybe.
own?
I mean, you know, I just remember it just sucked being a teenager.
Oh, it sucks. I hated being a teenager.
Yeah, I have a young employee. He started working for me when he was 15, and I think he's 19 now. And he called me once, and he was struggling. You know, he was struggling. I mean, when I listened to what he was struggling with, it was easy for me to be like, "Hey, man, being a teenager sucks, and everything you're talking about is like just part of it," you know. But he was seeing it as this kind of like huge life altering type of scenarios. But it was like, to me, it was like, yeah, I remember dealing with all that stuff. It sucked. And that's just, being a teenager sucks. I mean, that's the only way I could really describe it. So it's possible that I was,
when you said that. He probably,
I hope so. I mean, I think he snapped out of it, at least at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, I don't know what it's like for other people, but I remember feeling really lonely and feeling like disconnected from everybody, even my group of people that I was always around. I always had this feeling like none of them liked me. And, you know, and I also was kind of, I guess I was kind of a dick a little bit, you know. I was like, you know, I was just, and I don't know if it's kind of part of being a teenager where you, if somebody isn't doing your thing the same way that you do it, like you think that they're doing it wrong. Like if you listen to heavy metal, but you don't listen to these bands, like, oh, you're a poser or whatever. So I kind of had that sort of chip on my shoulder kind of attitude. And I alienated myself from my own friends, to where, you know, in high school, I just kind of didn't really feel like I fit anywhere. So that could be possibly part of it. I'm not sure, but I also wonder if that's just normal. Like when you look at like the popular kids or the jocks and the cheerleaders, and they all look super happy all the time, they're probably dealing with stuff under the surface, just like the rest of us are, but they just have a different version of existence than maybe we do. So like I was like the heavy metal kid, and there was like 6 of us, and then ended up transitioning over into a more punk kind of crowd, and there was probably 8 or 9 of us in that group, you know. So we weren't really like part of the whole popular kind of thing. So I don't know. I mean, I wonder if that is. I mean, I remember my parents were really concerned about me for a while, and I don't know if it was just because I was taking a different path than the rest of my siblings. Like I was the one that was, you know, getting caught drinking behind a store and getting arrested and doing all these dumb things, like never getting arrested for anything serious, but it was just going out and doing dumb things that I probably shouldn't be doing. But to me, it just felt like that was just, it felt normal to me. I mean, so I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure if it spawns from that or not, to be honest.
If you think about it, like, just understand, like the thing that you just described, I remember, you know, high school too, and middle school, and communicating that to that kid, you know, it's really giving somebody hope that it's not going to stay this way. And I remember telling my kids and my daughter, you know, as a teenager, she's a teenager now, just saying, you know, listen, you're interacting with a bunch of people who are really young, and they're all making mistakes, and they're all not knowing how to resolve conflict, and they're all having different emotional experiences that they haven't learned how to navigate yet. So you're basically age segregated with a bunch of assholes, basically. Let's just be honest. So it's like, so it's not going to be like, if you and I were hanging out with a group of people who are just a bunch of assholes, like we may not be that happy, right? In general.
Yeah.
And if we were assholes too, we may not be that happy. But I think that, like, just if you think about yourself, Mike, how I know for me that the shame of my adolescent years followed me until I think I went to a high school reunion and I claimed back a different identity because I still carried it, you know, whatever shame I had from, and even if like I think also like when you choose a group of friends, I don't know if you did this or not, but I know that one of the reasons that I chose different groups of friends through my life were because they were the ones who wouldn't notice my crap. They were the ones that they were coming from a house that maybe had neglect also. They were coming from a house also that they wouldn't judge the shame that I felt I had. So it's like, I'm going to gravitate. There's no way I'm fitting in with those people. And I always felt that too, like that I wasn't, that, you know, that when I left, people were talking about me. They didn't like me. And the truth is they really did like me, you know,
Yeah.
like a lot, but you know, it's weird. Like that kind of stuff. I still can have that feeling as an adult, you know. I don't know what they would see in me. These people don't really like me. I bet you when I leave the room, they're going to talk some shit about me. I literally think it, you know.
Yeah.
But so you're saying you don't know, but like, think about, can we separate like any of our internal, like our struggles? Can we really separate it from, like, that's all still you, right?
Yeah. The biggest lessons are from all that shit. I mean,
Yeah.
I think about that all the time. And something you mentioned, how the shame from your younger years kind of followed you for a long time. That was me.
Follows me.
Yeah. I mean, I made a conscious effort to stop giving a shit about that stuff. And it took a long time. It was those kind of things are the only things where I kind of believe in the fake it till you make it statement. Like, it's pretty stupid when you're faking it like you're rich until you make it, or, in my opinion. I mean,
yeah,
I don't care what anybody does, to be honest, but
yeah,
my whole thing was like, I have to fake that I don't care about that stuff until I actually don't care about that stuff. And it was the same thing with confidence. Like, I had a real lack of confidence for most of my life until I decided, you know, I'm sick of this shit. I'm going to be confident. And so I just presented myself as a confident person, and I got it wrong. Like, it turned to arrogance at times and, you know, things like that. But I faked confidence until I actually became confident. And now I'm very confident, like, for the most part. I mean, when I went to the Arte Syndicate summit, I was kind of like, oh shit, I'm out of my league here for a bit. But then I had some conversations with people that were way higher than me financially, but I was actually contributing to some ideas and things like that. So it pretty quickly, my confidence came back pretty quickly, but it can follow me for sure.
You know, Mike, one of the first things that I went to in Arte was in St. Louis. Doesn't matter when, but one of the first things that Andy and Ed said, it was Andy who said it. He said, "Who in here feels like they don't belong?" And every single person raised their hand, and guess who else raised their hand? Ed and Andy.
Oh shit, that's crazy.
It was awesome. And the other thing that at that particular one, Andy said, Ed just did an unbelievable fire talk. You know, he just delivered it. It was great. And then Andy was in the back. He comes out, you know, behind the stage. He comes back and he says, you know, Ed's like all uptight in the back. He doesn't know if he did a good job. Like he actually told on him. Oh my God, if that was my friend, I would freaking kill them. But he went out and just he just told everybody what his buddy was feeling in the back. Like,
oh my God.
But it was such a gift for me because I would feel the same way. Even if people were clapping, I'd be like, oh my God, did I do all right? Was that blah, 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 right? I got to know how you said you faked it till you made it with the confidence, but I have a thought. I'm thinking you just went off the grid. You created something and you stayed with it. You married it till it became whatever it became so far. Like, you know, you hear that confidence is when we, you know, keep a promise to ourselves, when we keep showing up to for ourselves. I feel like responsible acts produce self-esteem, whatever, but I'm thinking that helped your confidence. But like, what would you say to someone who's really just struggling, even a teenager who listens or whatever? Just what do you think? And listen, I'm brainstorming with you because I don't have all the answers either. Yeah. Like, how do we get this shit together? How do we get our confidence that lasts? Just decide. I think we got to just decide. Mike.
Yeah. To me, I feel like that's the main one.
It is
deciding. And then you sort of chip away at the other stuff. Cause like, when I made this decision that I was going to be confident, I wasn't taking the best care of myself. You know, I was kind of fat and I was drinking and doing a little bit of drugs and doing stuff that didn't really serve me. And but I decided that I was going to be confident either way, you know. And so I that was the first step, but then I had to chip away at these other things, you know. After a while, I kind of realized, you know, I'm thinking about being overweight all day long, all day long, you know. So like I'm wearing a shirt and I'm like, my belly's all kind of whatever. And I sit down and it kind of flops over my belt. And I was probably like 65 pounds heavier than I am now. And I'm probably at a pretty decent weight right now. So once I realized, I was like, I'm sick of being on this stupid journey. You know, I don't want to be on this, like, I'm losing weight. Like I'm going to be losing weight for the rest of my life if I keep living like this. Like exactly. It's just a sucky way to live, you know? Yeah. So I got that in order. And through that, you know, I was on antidepressants for like 10 years and probably the worst way you could possibly do it. But I just said, fuck all this, and just went cold turkey and just stopped taking it, which I probably should not have done.
Therapist.
Yeah, I shouldn't have done it that way. I knew that I probably was doing it wrong, but I was eating whole foods. I was meditating all the time. I was exercising, and I was like, you know what? I really believe that I have this. And I don't recommend this to anybody, but I was on a couple of pretty strong ones. And I know that if I missed the dose, the next day was going to be pretty shitty. You know, it was on that level. So I just sat down with myself and I meditated, and I was like, I'm going to do this. And I know that anything that happens is going to be in my head, and I'm just going to get through it. And I know I've done all this work and whatever. It was fine. I don't know how, but it just was perfectly fine. And I ended up being a much better person not being on that, because I felt like I was doing the work I needed to do. I felt like, I know we're getting a little off the rails here, but
no, it's good.
I felt like I was on antidepressants because I wasn't taking good care of myself. Like I didn't feel like I really needed to be on them. It was a Band-Aid for something I should have been doing. So as far as getting back to the gaining your confidence, I mean, the first part obviously was making the decision, and it actually kind of worked. The more I told myself I'm confident and I believe in myself and all this kind of stuff, whatever it was I was telling myself. And then I started just chipping away at the things that I knew that weren't right. You know, like I shouldn't be walking around with 60 pounds more body fat than I should be. I got to take care of that. And so I ended up taking care of that. And, you know, now I'm reading every day. And that was only 2 years ago that I started doing that. And I'm 48 years old. So like got a lot of catching up to do, but even that has, I mean, the amount of change in terms of personal development that I've made from doing that, reading every day.
I know.
It's insane. You can see it in my business too. I just talked about this. Like I showed a graph to my team, and it was from this time we started this graffiti business to, because we didn't talk about it, but there's a business side of it. It's not really relevant to what we're talking about. But so I showed them, I was like, because I wanted everybody to start reading every day on my team. And I was like, let me show you what happened. You see this little graph, and it's like you know, the early days of some crypto coin. You know, it's like from 2015 to 2020, it's just barely even moving. And then I remembered what book I read. So I went back to Amazon and I found when did I buy it. And so I put a little check mark right where I started reading every day. And the graph just went like
Love that.
monthly
Yes.
sales. And it
Yes.
wasn't just because I was reading, but it was reading, implementing, and doing all these things, you know. So all of those things, you know, you just need to do stuff that is going to fix the things that you're struggling with, in my opinion, outside of making the decision to be confident, and then just start getting rid of the stuff that is kind of holding you from actually being confident. Because when I said I'm confident, but I was feeling like I'm fat also, I'm like, there's a misaligned in what's going on here. So I had to fix, you know, so that's basically what I think would be effective if somebody was trying to do the same thing.
You know, that I always tell my team, I say, to the degree that we personally develop is to the degree that we succeed, you know. And this I'll throw a little dab of neuroscience in there, you know, but when we have a decision to make, once we make a decision, the reason also that it's such a power move, and you probably already know this, is that we have different neuron clusters that are responsible for whatever the decision is. So let's say it's like, I don't know, stay fat, don't stay fat. I don't know, I'm making that up. Be confident, don't be confident. It's so simplistic what I'm saying, but basically that neuron cluster that you're focused on or that you're thinking about is firing, and it inhibits the other neuron clusters, whatever they are. But once you make a decision, winner takes all, that neuron cluster becomes the one that is the only one firing. Our brain, and I'm using language that doesn't have to do with real bodily things, but it's like almost like our brain is not inflamed anymore. Like the decision's done. There's not back and forth, and there's like a peace. And then our brain is a goal-driven machine that now just, you know, so yes, master. Okay, so this is what you're doing. So, okay, now I'm going to point you in the direction to all the things that are confidence building. And it's so amazing that we have this power. That's my big mission. It's called Mission Awake. It's that we have a power within us, like Dorothy, you know, her little slippers, and Glinda's like, you had the power all along, dear. You know, yeah. I feel like we have this freaking power to direct our body, our brain, our thoughts, our feelings, and our core beliefs to take us exactly where we want to go that aligns with us. But I feel like what you did is that you created a space for a kid to do that. You know, maybe you're not using those words, but you're saying, here's this thing that's inside of you. Let's create, which you're not saying, maybe you are, I don't know, but you're giving them an avenue to think about it differently, which will then have their brain drive them differently, right? And it's just an incredible, it's a really cool thing that you're doing. And there's so much more to you. I feel like we just like kind of touch the surface. And we have to go, but I want to know, what is your business? Can you just tell us?
Oh, sure.
Tell us about it.
Yeah, it's not super exciting, but
I'm sure it is.
Had a mission. I don't know. It's the core focus of the business is we provide what graffiti writers need. So it fits into everything that we do. So graffiti writers need, you know, things to do art with. So we carry those supplies. And then stickers became this huge thing in the graffiti culture. They all have stickers. So we started printing stickers, and then it ties into the nonprofit stuff. You know, we provide venues for them to express themselves because they need that. And then I provide educational content because they need to learn about things. So I do that on social media. I do my podcast. So the business is mainly retail. We sell high-end supplies. We make a couple of our own original products. We print stickers, which is kind of the bulk of the business, and our original products as well. And then, so we have 2 retail locations now, and then most of the business comes from e-commerce. So we do do a lot of that kind of stuff. So, I mean, that's the gist of it, the Cliff Notes version of the business. So that's growing crazy. I mean, I'm very, very, very focused on scaling that right now.
You know what I find it interesting that you said something like it's not exciting. What did you say? I don't even know what you said. You played it down or whatever.
I think I have a bad habit of doing that. I mean, the way I look at it is like, oh, we just sell shit, online. It's like, whatever. It's like, listen, it's more to that than me. I mean, to me, it's more to that. I don't know. I feel like when I explain it, it's not as exciting as the other stuff.
Well, I do want to tell you something that I'm going to explain it in a way that is exciting because I hear it as exciting. So I think that maybe you're just not hearing unbelievably what you're doing, because what you're doing is it's just incredible. You're providing the tools and the stuff that someone needs to create themselves, that spark inside but at the same time, you're branding yourself and communicating with this audience, your audience, to do it in a really good way that makes the world a better place. So you're taking people who are expressing art, their creativity, in a way that they're not knowing how to do it in a way that's going to bring them greatness and good things. And you're providing that. Like it's like taking something that is perceived as dark in our culture and making it light. That's very exciting.
That makes sense. I hadn't really thought of it that way before.
glad I could do that for you there, Mike. Yeah, but shit, oh my God, I could tell you so much more I hear, but I think you have to know that. Maybe the fact that you don't know that is what makes it so. The kids, you're just so unassuming and humble as a human. Or maybe you just beat the shit out of yourself. I can't tell the difference. maybe
a little of both. I don't think I do that anymore. I used to, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, not so much anymore. But I mainly just, there's a whole thing of a divide in our culture. It's like they call them toys, like the young people that are just getting into the culture. They don't know all the rules and all this kind of stuff. And then there's the OGs or the old school writers, and there's a disconnect between those. And so I feel like my whole thing is I don't want to be that guy where you come into my shop and I work the counter sometimes still. I want them to feel we're the same, so even if like a little kid comes in, and it's one thing we learned from Arate with the sensory acuity. So like when a kid comes in and he looks like he's really confused and he's really shy and all that kind of stuff, I want to meet him where he's at. Like I don't act confused or anything, but I know that he needs some guidance. So I want to be humble enough to where he's comfortable asking me those things. And then if somebody comes in that obviously knows everything they need to know, I'm just there, tell me what you want and I'll get it to you. I do it in a nice way, obviously. But so I feel like just maintaining that humility is the best way to at least connect to these young kids that are really shy and they don't know, they don't want to ask questions because they don't want to feel like they don't know things they're supposed to know. But if I'm coming off in a way that I'm like, hey, I understand. I didn't know what these tips were until like 2 years ago. Like I've been writing all 30 some years, so I try to connect with them on a level to make them comfortable. So I think that may be part of it, but I think I don't know. I think what I was talking about with the confidence kind of turning into arrogance at one point, I think it's sort of a correction in that regard. I was kind of like, nobody likes that. I got to come back to another, a little more baseline humility, but I might go a little too far in the wrong direction when I'm like an overcorrection, maybe sometimes where I'm like, no, whatever. Doesn't matter what I'm doing. It's just these little things, so I don't know if that makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense. And I think that all of us, when we're trying to change like an embedded behavior, like the pendulum will swing, like far, and then we, like you said, like we come back to, it's all part of it. Just you know, it's very touching. You know, isn't that what we all want? You know, aren't we all that little kid who walks into the store and feels like we don't belong, we don't know? You know, we're taught in our society, we live in a mistake averse society. And also, you know, we're taught like being a novice is scary because you don't really want to show what you don't know or how vulnerable you are. And, you know, the love and the kindness that you're showing it's really what we all need, you know, and you're providing it in this arena. But I feel like just that message for all of us, like that's what I want to, whenever somebody feels uncomfortable, I want to be able to say, listen, I get it. I feel this. It's like, cause I do, but you know, like, I think we're just sometimes afraid to show, like, I don't know what sucks about us, what we're afraid of, or all of it. Like, but if we could just do that, like everybody would feel a lot safer, right?
Yeah,
And more connected.
for
So
sure.
anything that we can do to contribute to that, like I feel like you contributed that here. I'm really super grateful that you came here. I didn't know you, and I feel like I know you now. I feel like when we're at a summit that we'll be fast friends because I really, really admire you. I honor just what you're doing. Just you're a good soul. I can tell you're a good man.
Thank you.
And I know that you're making a much bigger difference than you even realize. So I'm really grateful that you came on.
I'm
And
grateful for the opportunity. I had a great time talking to you.
yeah, it's really good. So can you tell people where to find you? It's going to be in the show notes. You know, we're going to do that. But anybody here, I just want to throw out to you guys, listen to Mike's mission, and any way that you can contribute, you know, buy his shit, like and subscribe to his podcast, you know, get on his social media and participate, because what you're doing when you do that, I mean, you guys heard him. This is a dude who's giving back. And you know what? Anything that we can contribute to that is we're like a part of that mission. So I'm just asking you guys to do that. And, you know, in any way that you can, you know, get on eye level with anyone, really, that's a big thing. So tell us where they can show their love for you.
We're pretty active on social media, so you can find us on at Machine Studio on Instagram and TikTok. We're pretty active on both of those platforms. And then we have machinestudio.com. I'm adding all of the community stuff to that. So right now it's mainly e-commerce, and then there's some graffiti education content on there. But that's going to be the main hub for sort of everything. And then if they want to check out the podcast, it's Graffiti Machine. You can find it on any podcast platforms.
Yeah, guys, listen, subscribe, like it, just, you know, show your love. Okay. This dude's a good dude. I know you all hear it. All right.
Appreciate you.
Yeah, I appreciate you. Thank you so much for being here.